I always believed humiliation had a sound. For me, it was the sharp electronic beep of a grocery scanner followed by the cashier's bored voice saying that my payment had been declined. The line behind me stretched halfway down the frozen food aisle, carts squeaking, people sighing far louder than necessary. I swallowed hard and tried again, pretending I had simply tapped too fast. But when the same denial flashed on the screen, the cashier's eyebrows lifted amused in a way that made my stomach twist. "Your card is not going through." I could feel eyes on my back, sharp and judgmental. I whispered that it must be a mistake. My hands shook as I pulled out my EBT card, praying silently that this time it would scan. It did not. The cashier sighed and motioned toward the side. "You need to step out of line. Others need to pay." The woman behind me let out a loud groan. "Seriously, this always happens when you let people like her shop here." My chest burned. I felt my face heat as if someone had pressed a hot iron against my skin. People like her. I wanted to disappear. Emma tugged on my coat, confused eyes looking up at me. "Mama!" Why is everyone staring? I forced a smile that did not feel real. "It is fine, honey. Everything is fine." But nothing felt fine. My groceries were bagged in the flimsiest plastic the store stocked. Discount noodles off-brand cereal canned soup I had spent the last week coupon clipping for. I picked them up and stepped aside, but another woman muttered loudly, "If you cannot afford food, stop having kids." The words hit me like a slap. I felt the sting behind my eyes, but I held my chin up because my daughter was watching. I pushed the cart toward the exit, each step feeling heavier than the last. When the automatic doors slid open, the winter rain slapped me in the face. Wind shoved at my clothes and soaked the thin fabric instantly. I shifted the bags to one arm, held Emma's hand with the other, and walked out into what felt like a punishment from the sky itself. My breath plumed into the icy air. I told myself it would get better once we were home. But then I saw him. A small boy sat beneath the overhang of the bus stop, curled into a ball, his thin jacket soaked. His arms were wrapped around a woman who lay slumped against the bench, her skin pale and her lips trembling. She looked barely conscious. The boy was trying to shield her with his own body. Rain hit his face, and he did not even blink. The bags in my hands grew lighter as my grip loosened. Emma stopped walking. "Mama!" She tugged on my arm again, harder this time. "Mama, look. That boy looks like me." I stared at her, startled. "Honey, do not say things like that." But she pointed again, more insistent now. "That boy. He looks like my brother." My breath caught in my throat. I turned fully toward him and for the first time really looked. The same wide brown eyes, the same long eyelashes, the same shape of the face that so many people told me Emma inherited from her father. My chest tightened. It was impossible. Completely impossible. Yet the resemblance was haunting. Before I could speak, a park security guard strode toward the bus stop, waving his hand angrily. "You cannot stay here. Move along. This is city property, not a shelter." The boy flinched. The woman tried to lift her head, but collapsed back against him. The guard shook his head with visible annoyance, muttering about loiterers and troublemakers. Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the humiliation still buzzing under my skin. Maybe it was the animal instinct of a mother who knew that fear in the eyes of a child because she had seen it in her own daughter. Or maybe it was the sight of Emma stepping forward, her small voice trembling, but brave. "Mama, please. He is cold. He is scared. He needs help." I did not think. I only moved. I approached them slowly, my heart thumping in painful beats. "Are you all right?" I asked gently. The boy looked up protective and wary. "My mom is sick. She fainted. We need somewhere warm." His voice shook and he clutched her hand with both of his. My bags slid to the wet ground as I knelt beside them. I touched the woman's forehead. Burning hot. She needed help immediately. The guard huffed and walked away as if the whole thing bored him. I looked at the boy and then at my daughter, who was staring at him as though she had known him forever. And suddenly I made a choice that would change the rest of my life. "Come with me," I said. "I have a place nearby. It is warm. I can help." The boy stared, stunned. The woman whispered something I could not hear. Rain hit my shoulders cold and insistent, but something warm unfurled inside me. I did not know that this single decision would unravel a secret I never knew I was living inside. I did not know it would bring my past crashing into my present. I only knew that Emma was right about one thing. Nothing about that moment was random. Rain followed us like a shadow as we hurried across the street, Emma gripping my hand while the boy helped support his mother. She was barely conscious, murmuring soft sounds that blended with the storm. The moment we stepped into my small apartment, warm air wrapped around us, the heater humming like a tired friend doing its best. The room was small, cluttered in places I tried to keep hidden from visitors, but tonight I cared about none of that. The boy looked around like he was entering another world. Not a nicer world, just a safer one. I moved quickly, pulling blankets from the couch, while Emma brought her little pink stool and placed it beside the woman as if to say she mattered enough to be taken care of. "Set her here," I said softly. The boy nodded and lowered his mother onto the couch, adjusting her head with gentle hands, far too steady for a child. He moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this many times. Too many times. I heated water, grabbed a wet cloth, and knelt beside her, wiping the sweat from her forehead. Feverish, dehydrated, exhausted, but breathing steadily. I looked up at the boy. "What is your name?" He hesitated, then said, "Theo." "And your mom?" "Her name is Lily." I nodded. I reached for his hands, noticing how cold they were. When did she faint earlier today? She did not eat much. I tried to get food, but he glanced at Emma as if embarrassed. "I do not have money." Emma, full of the unfiltered honesty of children, simply smiled. "That is okay. We have soup. Do you want soup?" Theo blinked at her as if kindness was a language he understood only faintly. "Maybe for my mom," he whispered. "I am not hungry." But his stomach growled loudly, betraying him completely. I turned to the stove. "Dinner first. No arguments." Emma nodded, already moving chairs around like she was preparing for company she had been waiting for her whole life. While the soup simmered, she sat cross-legged on the floor beside Theo, coloring in her notebook. She slid a blank page toward him. "You can draw too if you want." Theo looked at the crayon like it was a rare treasure he was afraid to break. Slowly, carefully, he drew a crooked stick figure holding a smaller hand. Emma leaned in close. "Is that you and your mommy?" He shook his head. "No." His eyes flicked toward me, then back down. "That is me and someone else." I wanted to press, but something in his voice told me not to. Instead, I ladled soup into bowls and placed one in front of him. His hands hovered above it nervously. "Can I really have this?" he whispered. "You do not need to ask for permission to eat, sweetheart," I said gently. "You are safe here." He ate slowly at first, small bites, watching me as if checking whether I would take it away. But when he realized the bowl really was his, he ate with a quiet desperation that squeezed my heart. Emma chatted beside him about class, about her stuffed animals, about how she could whistle louder than any kid in her school. Theo finally smiled, a small, fleeting thing, but a smile nonetheless. As they talked, Lily stirred on the couch. Her eyes fluttered open. Theo rushed to her side. "Mama!" I moved closer. "You fainted. You need rest." She stared at me confused. "We should not be here. I do not want to cause trouble." Her voice was thin, ashamed. "You are not causing trouble," I said firmly. "You needed help. That is enough reason." Tears filled her eyes, not from weakness, but from the shock of finally being seen. She caught sight of Emma and froze. For a moment, something unreadable flickered across her face. Recognition, fear, memory. But she blinked it away so quickly I wondered if I imagined it. Theo held her hand. She let out a small smile for him. "I am sorry," she whispered to me. "I am sorry you found us like that." I shook my head. "I am glad I did. Theo belongs somewhere warm." Lily closed her eyes as if those words hurt more than they comforted. She drifted back to sleep, breathing steadier now. I covered her with a blanket and settled on the chair nearby. Theo curled up beside Emma on the rug, the two of them shoulder to shoulder, like natural siblings, like the world had stitched something between them long before I ever stepped into it. He watched his mother sleep. "She works so hard," he said quietly. "She tries to make everything good. Sometimes she does not eat so I can eat. Sometimes she sleeps sitting up because she is scared something will happen while we rest." His voice cracked. "I am trying to be strong for her." Before I could respond, Emma reached out and took his hand. "My mommy says being strong does not mean doing everything alone." My chest clenched. The simplicity of children often reveals truths adults bury too deeply to touch. Theo stared at Emma, his eyes wide, as if she had spoken a language only his heart understood. I asked him gently, "Do you have anyone else? Anyone who could help?" His expression shifted, clouds rolling in. "No, it has just been us. For a long time." He hesitated. "But that is okay. Mama says help makes you weak." I shook my head immediately. "Your mother is brave, but she is wrong about one thing. Accepting help is not weakness. It is survival." He stared at me for a long moment as if no adult had ever said something like that to him. Finally, he whispered, "Thank you." Emma leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder with the unself-conscious trust only children give freely. As I watched them sitting there under the soft yellow light of my tiny apartment, the truth pressed harder against the edges of my mind. The similarity between them was not just striking. It was unsettling. Impossible. But the way they sat together, the easy belonging between them, the shared softness in their features, the identical shape of their eyes, I felt something shift inside me, something dangerous, something that whispered that this night was not an accident. I had taken in a boy who should have never been invisible, and somehow he already felt like he belonged to us. Night settled over the apartment like a soft blanket, dimming the edges of the cluttered room until only the glow from the small lamp beside the couch remained. Lily slept deeply, the rise and fall of her breath finally steady after a bowl of warm soup and medicine. Theo and Emma had drifted off earlier, curled together on a pile of blankets as if they had been siblings all their lives. Their heads touched lightly, their hands folded close to their chests, each of them exhausted in a way only children living too much life too soon could be. I sat across the room in the old armchair, knees pulled up, the silence broken only by the rhythmic hum of the heater. The storm outside had weakened to a drizzle, tapping gently against the window, like a reminder that the world, even in its harshness, could sometimes soften. I watched Lily carefully, her pale face, her chapped lips, the faint tremble in her sleep. There was beauty in her exhaustion, but also a haunting sadness, a life lived in fear, in survival, in sacrifice. And I felt a stab of something I couldn't name yet. Guilt, perhaps. Hope, perhaps more. After a while, she stirred, her eyes cracking open just enough to let in the warm glow of the apartment. She blinked a few times before her gaze landed on me. I thought she'd panic or ask where she was, but instead she whispered almost too quietly for me to hear. "You have a gentle home?" I swallowed. "It is not much." "It is enough," she said. "More than enough." She tried to sit up, but I gently pressed her shoulder back down. "You should rest, Lily. You fainted." She let out a shivering exhale, her eyes glistening. "I am so tired of resting," she whispered. "I am tired of fighting alone." She stared at the ceiling as if searching for something she had lost long ago. After a long silence, she said, "I was not always like this." My throat tightened. None of us were. Her eyes moved to the sleeping children. She stared at them so long, her expression shifted, softened, cracked open. She lifted a shaking hand to her lips, swallowing hard. "They look alike," she whispered. Her voice quivered. My heart stuttered. I knew it. I had felt it from the moment Emma said that wild, impossible sentence in the rain. But hearing Lily say it made something twist violently inside me. "Do you see it too?" I whispered. Slowly, painfully, she nodded. Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked away as if the truth itself burned her. It hurt so much more than I expected. I expected denial, anger, shock, but not this quiet, resigned heartbreak. Not this ache that felt like she had carried a secret for years that was finally too heavy to bear. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air tighter. I leaned forward. "Lily, what are you trying to tell me?" She squeezed her eyes shut, tears leaking from the corners. "I should not say it. I promised myself I would never say it, not to anyone. Not again." "Say what?" Her voice broke. "The truth. The truth about Theo's father." My heartbeat quickened. She placed a trembling hand over her chest. "Years ago, I loved someone, truly loved him, and he loved me too, or I thought he did. Then, one day, he disappeared. He left without saying goodbye, without knowing what he left behind." Her voice cracked into a painful whisper. "And I never told him." I felt the room tilt slightly the way it does when a buried memory forces its way back to the surface. But Lily was not finished. She stared at her sleeping son, her face hollowing with grief. "Theo has been asking about his father for years. I told him his father loved him but could not stay." She let out a bitter laugh, small and shattered. "I thought I was doing the right thing, protecting them both. But I was wrong." I waited, my breath caught in my throat. Her voice softened to almost nothing. "And then, tonight, when your daughter looked at him and said that word, brother," something inside me broke. Tears slid down her cheeks. I could not stop thinking, what if this is the moment everything comes crashing down? My pulse hammered so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Lily looked at me finally, meeting my eyes with a rawness that felt like she was handing me her entire heart. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. I never wanted to lie, but I have been living in fear for so long. Fear he would find us. Fear he would reject his son. Fear he would take him away. Fear he would hate me for keeping the truth." Her voice trembled violently. Fear he would not care at all. A tear rolled down my cheek before I could stop it. This woman had carried shame and loneliness like armor for years. She had raised a child in shadows, waiting for a man who may never return, haunted by the possibility that she had ruined everything and saved nothing. Lily covered her face with her hands. "I do not even know if he is alive. And even if he is, even if by some miracle he walked through this door right now, what would I say? How do you tell someone they have a child they never knew existed? How do you tell someone you loved them so much that losing them destroyed you?" I sat frozen, absorbing the magnitude of what she had confessed. The weight of her story pressed into the air until it felt like I could barely breathe. Finally, I whispered, "Lily, who is he?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. She looked at Theo, at Emma, at me. And then, before she could stop herself, the truth finally slipped free, like a wound bursting open. His name was Ethan. Ethan Miller. The room tilted, my stomach dropping through the floor. Of all the names, of all the men in all the possible stories, Ethan Miller, the one man I had spent years trying to erase from my own past, the man who had broken me long before life learned how to, the man I had never forgiven, the father I had never told Emma about. My breath hitched, my vision blurred, my world cracked open, and Lily whispered the final words that drowned me completely. "He never knew I was pregnant when he left." My heart shattered in a single silent beat. Ethan Miller was her past. Ethan Miller was my past. And suddenly, painfully, I realized the truth that had been creeping toward me since the moment I saw Theo's eyes. The boy asleep on my floor might not just be her son. He might be mine. By morning, the storm had passed, but the heaviness in the apartment had not. Lily's confession still rang in my ears like an echo trapped inside a bell, each repetition sharper than the last. Ethan Miller. The name I had buried so deep it should have turned to dust. The man I had once loved. The man I had once trusted. The man who had shattered me long before life finished the job. And now his child was sleeping in my living room. Or worse, both of his children. The air felt too small for truths that big, so I focused on what I could control. Lily had developed a fever overnight. Her skin was hot to the touch, her breath shallow. I tested it twice, then again hoping the thermometer was wrong, but it was not. She needed medication. Real medication, not the dollar store cough syrup she'd been rationing. I pulled on my jacket, lifted my purse, and whispered to the kids to stay quiet for Lily. Emma nodded with a seriousness far too old for her 7 years. Theo held onto his mother's hand, whispering, "Mama Sarah's coming right back." His little voice nearly broke me. I stepped outside into the biting wind, telling myself to breathe, telling myself not to think of Ethan, telling myself to just get through the next hour. At the CVS, the fluorescent lights were so harsh they felt like a punishment. I grabbed fever reducers, electrolyte packets, cough medicine, and tissues. Nothing fancy, just survival things. At the register, I placed them on the counter carefully. The cashier glanced at me, then at the items, then at my worn jacket and messy bun. She didn't smile. She didn't even pretend. "Insurance?" she asked flatly. "No," I said. "Self-pay." Her fingers tapped the keys. $73. I froze. I had 52. Even after digging every corner of my purse and coat pockets, even if I used the emergency 20 I'd hidden behind my phone case, I still didn't have enough. "I thought it'd be less," I whispered. "Generic brands." "It is generic," she snapped. "Prices go up. That's how it works." Behind me, someone exhaled loudly. "Some people shouldn't have kids if they can't afford cold medicine," a woman muttered. My face burned. "It's not for my kid," I said quietly. "It's for someone who needs—" "Yeah, sure," the woman scoffed. "I've heard every story. People like you always say you're helping someone else. People like you." The words hit harder than they should have. I tightened my grip on the counter. "Can you take off the tissues?" Still 61. Then take the electrolytes. Still 58. My throat tightened. The line behind me grew longer, impatient, irritated, judgmental. "Look," I whispered. "She has a fever. Please, Ma'am." The cashier said loudly enough for the entire line to hear. "If you don't have enough money, step aside. You are holding up paying customers." The humiliation slid over me like cold mud. My ears rang. My hands trembled. I felt myself shrinking, folding inward the way I always had when the world decided I was less. Then a voice rose behind me. Not loud, not angry, just steady. "Let her check out." I turned. A middle-aged man in a construction vest stepped forward. "I've got it," he said, handing the cashier his card without asking me a single question. Not about why I couldn't pay. Not about whether I deserved help. Just human decency. The cashier reluctantly scanned the items. I nearly collapsed from relief. "Thank you," I whispered. "You don't have to." "Everyone needs help sometimes," he said simply. "Don't make it heavier than it is." He gave a small nod and walked away before I could say anything else. The moment he left, the whispers started again. Probably scamming. People have no shame. That poor man wasting his money. I pushed out the door before I cried in front of strangers who already decided what kind of woman I was. Outside, the sky was gray, the air wet and sharp. I clutched the bag to my chest as if the medicine were made of gold. The walk home felt twice as long, every step weighted with humiliation and last night's truth pounding in my head. When I reached the apartment, my hands were still shaking. Inside, Emma ran to me immediately. "Mama, Theo cried for you." The way she said Mama made my heart twist. Theo peeked from behind her eyes, red. "Mommy was coughing," he whispered. I was scared. I knelt down so I was at their height. "I'm here now," I said gently. "I'm here." Theo threw his arms around me, suddenly pressing his face into my shoulder. Emma hugged my back. And for one fragile second, I wished the world would freeze and leave us like this forever. I hurried to Lily's side. She stirred weekly sweat on her forehead. "Medicine," I said, lifting her gently. "You need this." Her eyes fluttered open. "You didn't have to." "I did." She swallowed the medicine, her breathing easing slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I wish I could repay you." "You don't need to repay me." She looked at me then, eyes glassy full of shame I recognized from 100 moments of my own life. "The world has been cruel to me for so long," she whispered. "It is strange to feel someone being gentle." I opened my mouth to respond, but her next words made my heartbeat stutter. "It makes me afraid I won't deserve it." Something hit me like a blow, because I knew that feeling too well. I brushed her hair back. "You deserve this," I whispered. "All of it." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. And as I watched her fall asleep again, the humiliation from the store returned with fresh pain. Except now, it wasn't for me. It was for all of us. For Lily, for Theo, for Emma, for the world that seemed to break people like us without ever asking why we were already cracked. That afternoon, as I folded clothes and checked temperatures and tried to pretend my heart wasn't collapsing, Emma tugged my sleeve. "Mama," she whispered, glancing at Theo. "I don't want anyone to be mean to him ever again." "Me neither," I said softly, and the truth settled over me then, heavier than everything else. The world had humiliated me again today. But this time, I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for all three of them. Lily drifted in and out of sleep all afternoon, her breath shallow, her skin still warm with fever. I tried to keep things normal for the kids, putting on cartoons, slicing apples, folding the laundry in small, careful piles. But my mind wasn't quiet. It kept circling the same impossible truth. Ethan Miller. A name I had spent 8 years burying under bills and exhaustion and single mother survival. A name I had never once said out loud to Emma. A name I thought I'd never have to face again. Yet now pieces kept lining up like magnets pulling toward a terrible center. Emma's eyes, Theo's eyes, the strange familiarity of both children's faces, Lily's confession, and the ache in my chest that whispered the truth even before any evidence existed. It was almost a relief to throw myself into practical tasks. Diapers, dishes, soup, thermometers, anything that kept me from thinking too much. But life never lets you stay numb for long. By early evening, Lily's breathing shifted again, a wet, rattling sound. When I touched her forehead, it felt like fire. I grabbed the thermometer and waited, counting the seconds like they were prayers. 1:15, 1:18, 1:20, 1. Too high. Far too high. "Emma," I said gently, "go play with Theo for a few minutes. I need to help his mom." Emma nodded, pulling Theo toward the couch. He held her hand tightly, eyes wide. I knelt beside Lily and shook her gently. "Lily, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered halfway open, unfocused. "I'm fine," she whispered, "just tired." "You're not fine," I said urgently. "We need to cool you down." Her head rolled to the side. "No ambulance," she murmured. "No bills." "Please!" My heart squeezed. I knew that fear. Medical bills had nearly destroyed me once too. But this wasn't optional. "We'll manage." I lied softly. "Right now, we just need to help you breathe." I stood to grab a washcloth, my phone in my other hand. I was going to call 911, consequences be damned. But the moment I lifted her purse to find her insurance card, her phone slipped out and hit the floor. The screen lit up. A draft email was open. My chest tightened. I didn't intend to pry. I meant only to find her full name and birth date for the paramedics. But one line on the glowing screen caught my eye and froze my blood. To Ethan Miller. My breath caught. It felt like someone punched me clean and sharp. The email wasn't sent. It wasn't even finished. But the words were enough. "I never meant to hide him from you, but I was scared. And you never answered." My throat closed. Answered. Answered what? Answered when? My hands trembled as I scrolled the world tilting under my feet. Folder photos. A picture thumbnail showed 2 newborns. I clicked it before my brain could stop me. A hospital bassinet, 2 babies lying side by side, a pink bracelet on one wrist. Emma Miller, a blue bracelet on the other, baby boy Miller. My pulse thundered. "No," I whispered. "No, this. This can't." My breath fractured into pieces. The room swayed, My vision blurred. My daughter, my Emma, and a boy who looked just like her. Twins. My knees buckled and I sank to the floor, clutching the phone as if it were a lifeline or a bomb. My mind reeled back 8 years. The hospital room spinning, the chaos, the nurse saying cords were tangled. They needed to take one baby for oxygen. The panic, the exhaustion, the confusion, the hours that blurred together. They had told me Emma was fine. They had told me I had only one baby. Had I misunderstood? Had I been lied to? Had Lily taken him, or had something else happened that I never knew? My breath came in sharp gasps. I pressed my fist against my mouth, trying not to sob loud enough for the children to hear. When I looked again at the picture, my heart cracked clean down the center. Theo's eyes. Emma's eyes. They were the same eyes I once loved staring back at me from Ethan's face on the nights we thought the world was ours. My vision blurred again. I pressed the heel of my palm against my forehead. "Oh, God," I whispered. "What have I done? What have they done? What happened?" Just then, Theo's quiet voice drifted in from the living room. "Mama Sarah." I wiped my cheeks quickly and forced my voice steady. "1 minute, honey." Lily stirred weakly, her breath hitching. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Phone. I'm sorry." I clasped her hand. "Lily," I said softly but urgently, "who is Ethan Miller to you?" Her eyes fluttered open. Confusion, pain, shame, and grief. "Theo's father," she breathed. It hit me like a blow. My stomach twisted. My hands went ice cold. "Did he know?" I whispered. "Did he know you were pregnant?" A tear rolled down her temple. I tried to tell him, she rasped. He didn't answer. He just disappeared. My heart throbbed in my throat, beating so loud it drowned out everything else. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Her eyes met mine, cloudy and terrified. "Because I saw your daughter," she whispered. "I saw her eyes. I didn't want to break whatever life you built from the pieces he left." I stared at her breathless. "Lily," I whispered, "were our babies, born together." Something flickered in her gaze. Recognition, sorrow, and truth she no longer had the strength to hide. Her lips parted. "I think so," she whispered. "I think something happened at the hospital. Something wrong. I couldn't breathe. My legs felt numb. I placed my hand over my mouth to muffle the sound that clawed its way up my throat. Everything inside me felt like it was cracking, splitting open, spilling into places I couldn't name. I glanced back at the phone, at the photo, at the names on the hospital tags. Emma Miller. Baby boy Miller. Twins. My twins. A sob shook my whole body. Emma's laughter drifted faintly from the other room. Theo hummed quietly to himself next to her. Both so innocent. Both so undeserving of the truth that was now tearing through me like a wildfire. "Lily," I whispered, tears falling freely, "everything is about to change." And she closed her eyes again, exhausted, whispering, "I know." I spent most of that night sitting at the edge of Lily's bed, my heartbeat quick and uneven, my hands shaking no matter how tightly I clasped them together. Every minute or two I checked her breathing, then checked on the kids, then stared again at the photo on her phone as if the truth would somehow shift into something less devastating the longer I looked at it. But it didn't. Reality stayed sharp and cruel. Emma and Theo were twins, my daughter, her son. And Ethan Miller was the thread tying all of it together in ways I had never dared to imagine. By morning, Lily was still feverish but stable. The kids were curled together on the couch, Theo leaning against Emma as if he'd done it his entire life. The sight both pierced and soothed me. I needed answers. I needed truth. And I needed them now. So I did something I swore I would never do again. I went to find Ethan Miller, the man who had once loved me fiercely then vanished without explanation. The man whose disappearance had shattered everything I thought I knew about love and trust. The man who might be the father of both of my children. My hands trembled as I typed his name into my phone. Ethan Miller. It felt like biting into something cold and metal. Google loaded instantly. Same smile, Same jawline, same blue eyes. CFO of MillerTech. Successful. Untouchable. But his business profile meant nothing compared to the picture in my mind of Emma's eyes and Theo's in the way they mirrored each other with unsettling perfection. I found an address. His office. It felt surreal walking there, passing glass towers that reflected a version of life I had never known. A place where people wore tailored suits, not thrift store jackets. Where no one paid with an EBT card. Where no one knew what it was like to choose between electricity and groceries. The receptionist looked me up and down, lips pressed into a thin line. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said. "But I need to speak to Ethan. It's urgent." She barely blinked. "Mr. Miller does not accept walk-ins." Her voice carried a tone I knew too well. The tone people use when they see someone like me and assume I'm lost desperate or trying to ask for help I don't deserve. I squared my shoulders. "Tell him Sarah Harper needs to speak with him." Something flickered in her expression, recognition, or maybe surprise. She typed something quickly. 5 seconds later, her phone rang. She answered, her eyes widening. "Yes, sir." "Yes! I'll send her up." She hung up and stared at me like I'd just been unmasked. "Top floor. He's waiting." I stepped into the elevator, pulse pounding, with every beep announcing each rising level. When the doors opened, he was already standing there. Ethan. His hair was shorter than I remembered, his shoulders broader, his expression sharper. But his eyes, the same eyes I had fallen in love with at 23. The same eyes Emma had. The same eyes Theo had. His face lost color the moment he saw me. "Sarah," he breathed. God, I didn't think I'd ever see you again." His voice cracked on the last word, and for a split second I saw the boy I used to know, not the polished executive in front of me. I didn't give him time to speak again. "We need to talk about Lily." His jaw tightened. Pain flickered behind his eyes. "Is she okay? I heard she was sick from someone. I don't know how bad it is." That startled me. "Who told you? A friend?" he said, shaking his head. "It doesn't matter." "What happened? Is she in the hospital?" There was fear in his voice, sharp and real. He cared. That confused me more than it comforted me. "She collapsed," I said. "She needs help, and she's been trying to reach you." His eyes closed for a long second, as if steadying himself against a truth he didn't want to hear. "Sarah," he whispered, "I didn't know. I swear to you I didn't know." "She wrote emails," I said. "She tried to call." He rubbed his forehead. "My mother died that month. I lost my job. I moved states. I was drinking too much, shutting everyone out. I wasn't myself." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "But that isn't an excuse. I should have checked. I should have read. I should have stayed." His voice broke again. "I failed her." The elevator chimed softly behind us, a reminder of the world continuing around the two of us, while time stood still for our small wrecked universe. I swallowed hard. There was more he needed to hear. "Ethan," I said quietly, "you didn't just fail her." I reached into my pocket, pulling out a printed copy of the hospital photo I had taken from Lily's phone. 2 newborns, side by side, identical eyes, identical smiles. The day that should have been the greatest of my life, but had become the most confusing, most incomplete. His hand shook as he took the paper. His breath stuttered. "No," he whispered. "Oh, God, no." He stared at the picture like it was something sacred and horrific all at once. "Sarah, you had twins?" "I think we did," I whispered. "But something happened. Something none of us were told. Something Lily might have been forced into or trapped in or, I don't know." Tears filled his eyes. He pressed the heel of his hand to his mouth like he was trying to keep a scream inside. "Theo," he whispered. "He's mine. And Emma," I said, voice trembling. "She's yours too." He stumbled backward until he hit the edge of his desk. His head dropped into his hands. His shoulders shook. "Oh, God," he choked. "I missed everything. I wasn't there. I didn't protect any of you. I ruined everything." Anger flared in me then, hot, sharp, righteous. "No," I said firmly. "You ruined nothing. You abandoned us 8 years ago. You ignored her. You ignored me. And 2 children grew up believing they were alone because of choices you made." He looked up slowly, eyes red broken. "You're right," he whispered. "And I won't run again. Tell me what to do. Tell me how to fix this." The rage drained out of me, leaving only exhaustion. "You can't fix the past," I whispered. "But you can show up now." He nodded quickly, desperate. "I want to meet him," he said. "And Emma, please, Sarah, let me see them." I closed my eyes. My children. His children. A truth too big to hold, too fragile to ignore. When I opened them again, Ethan was still watching me, hope and fear warring in his expression. "All right," I whispered. "I'll bring them to you. But not because of you, because they deserve answers." His shoulders sagged with relief and something like gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. But I wasn't done. I stepped closer, my voice steady. "But hear me clearly, Ethan. You left once. If you ever hurt them again, I won't let you stay in their lives." His eyes filled again. "I won't run," he whispered. "I swear it." I nodded once, then turned toward the elevator. As the doors slid closed, his broken whisper drifted toward me. "I'll make this right, whatever it takes." And for the first time in 8 years, I let myself hope he meant it. I expected Ethan to call me every hour that day. I expected him to knock on my door the second I left his office, breathless and desperate to see the children he never knew he had. But he didn't. Not that morning, not that afternoon, not that night. Instead, hours passed like heavy stones being rolled across my chest, each one pressing harder than the last. Emma kept asking when Theo's mom would come home. I told her Lily needed rest. My voice never quite stopped trembling. Theo barely spoke. He just held Emma's stuffed bunny and stared at the door as if he understood something awful was coming. By midnight, Ethan still hadn't shown up. I lay awake replaying our conversation at his office, every tear, every tremor in his voice, every raw confession he had allowed himself to say. He had looked like he wanted nothing more than to run to them. So why didn't he? Why wasn't he here? At dawn, I was still awake when I heard quiet footsteps in the hallway. Not Ethan's, just the upstairs neighbor leaving early for work. I sat on the floor by the window arms around my knees, watching the first thin stripes of sunlight reach across the parking lot. For the first time since this began, I wondered if Ethan was already gone again, if the weight of the truth had crushed him into retreat, if facing his children was harder than loving them from a distance. That thought stung deep. When the kids woke up, Emma noticed right away how swollen my eyes were. She touched my cheek gently. "Mama, you cried." I forced a smile. Just tired, baby. But she wasn't fooled. She never was. That afternoon, I finally received a text. A single line. "Can we meet? No place. No explanation." Nothing. I hesitated, but they deserved answers. I sent him an address, the old churchyard 2 blocks away where Emma played sometimes. A place quiet enough for the truth, safe enough for the kids. I left them with Mrs. Carter downstairs and walked to the church alone, the cold air biting through my jacket. Ethan was already there, sitting on the bottom step, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. The moment he heard my footsteps, he stood up quickly. His eyes were bloodshot, and I knew instantly he hadn't slept. "Sarah," he breathed. "I'm so sorry." I folded my arms. "You disappeared again." He flinched. It landed exactly the way I intended it to. "I didn't leave," he said quietly. I couldn't come yesterday." "Why not?" He dragged a hand through his hair. "Because I didn't want them to see me like that. Not the first time. I was a mess. I still am." I stared at him, my anger mixing with a kind of tired understanding. "Ethan," I said, my voice low, "they don't need a perfect man. They need a present one." His face twisted in pain, and he nodded slowly. "You're right." Then he whispered something like a confession. "I stood outside your building last night. Twice. I got as far as the door, but then I froze. I didn't know if I deserved to see them. If I'd ruin everything the second I stepped in. My breath caught. I hated him for the things he'd done. But I also knew that kind of fear. The fear of mattering too much to someone you might fail. "You're their father," I said. "That's not something you earn or lose. It's something you show up for." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. Can I finally show up?" I studied him for a long, silent moment, letting the cold wind whip my hair around my face. There were 1,000 things I could have said to him. Accusations, reminders of the years he had missed, the nights I cried alone, the afternoons I held Emma while she asked why she didn't have a daddy. But none of that would help the children standing on the edge of a life-changing truth. So I said the only thing that mattered. "I'll bring them here." I walked back to the building, heart pounding. Mrs. Carter opened her door before I even knocked. "They're nervous," she whispered, "especially the boy." My chest tightened. I knelt down on the carpet. "Emma," I said softly. "Theo, someone wants to meet you." Theo looked up, eyes wide and frightened. "Is it my mom?" The crack in his voice broke me. "No, sweetheart," I said, pulling him close. "But it's someone important." Emma was the first to grab her shoes. She always moved toward the light, even when she didn't understand the darkness. We walked together to the church. I could feel both kids shaking though they tried to hide it. When we turned the corner, Ethan was standing exactly where I left him. His hands were trembling. For a few seconds, no one moved. Emma tugged my sleeve. "Mama," she whispered. "Is that him?" I nodded. Theo stepped behind me, instinctively peeking out with wide, uncertain eyes. Ethan dropped to his knees immediately. No hesitation this time. No fear strong enough to hold him back. Just a father finally kneeling for the children he had missed for almost a decade. "Hi," he whispered, voice breaking. I'm Ethan." Emma didn't wait. She approached him slowly, studying his face like she was reading a familiar picture in a new frame. "Do you know my mom?" she asked bluntly. He let out a single, choked laugh. "Yes," he whispered. "More than you know." Theo stayed frozen. I felt his little hand clutch my coat. Ethan looked at him, eyes filling. "Theo," he breathed, I'm so sorry I wasn't there." The boy blinked, confused. Why Ethan's voice shattered. "Because I should have been, from the beginning." Theo stepped forward an inch, then stopped. His voice was barely a whisper. "Are you my dad?" The world held its breath. Ethan nodded, slow and trembling. "Yes, if you'll let me be." Theo hesitated. Then he took one shaky step, then another. Then he ran straight into Ethan's arms. Emma followed, pressing herself against them both. I felt the wind knock out of me at the sight. Ethan hugged them like someone holding life for the first time. Tears streamed down his face. And mine. And maybe even heaven's. He looked up at me over their heads, not asking forgiveness, not expecting anything, just silently promising he wouldn't run again. I believed him. For the first time in 8 years. I believed him. The week that followed felt like I was walking through a dream someone else had broken before I stepped inside it. After the moment at the church, when Ethan held both children like he had been holding his breath for 8 years, I thought maybe the worst was behind us. But life rarely gives miracles without a cost. The first sign came that night when Lily's breathing changed. She had been weak, exhausted, drifting in and out of sleep. But I didn't realize how close she was to the edge until I heard the harsh crackle in her chest. I rushed to her bedside. Her skin was cold damp. "Lily," I whispered, shaking her gently. "Wake up. Stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open for less than a second. "Sarah," she croaked, barely audible. "Take care of them." My heart lurched painfully. I called 911 with shaking hands, trying to keep my voice steady for the kids. Emma held Theo tightly, the two of them sitting on the kitchen floor, as paramedics lifted Lily onto a stretcher. Theo cried without sound, tears streaming silently down his cheeks. "Mama," he whispered to her, but she never opened her eyes. The ambulance lights flashed across their faces as the doors slammed shut. When we reached the hospital, the fluorescent lights were too bright, too harsh. Doctors moved around her with efficient urgency, but after 15 minutes, 20:30, the tone shifted. A nurse approached us quietly, her expression the kind I had seen too many times in my life. "We're doing everything we can," she said gently, "but her body is very weak." And then came the question that shattered something inside me. "Do you know if she has insurance?" Theo looked up at me with eyes full of terror. I swallowed the burn in my throat. "I'll take care of it," I told the nurse, even though I had no idea how. Hours blurred into exhaustion. By the time dawn crept into the waiting room, Lily's heart had stopped. The doctor's voice was calm, practiced, but the words sliced me open anyway. "I'm very sorry." There was nothing more we could do. Theo's scream was piercing feral, the kind that tears something out of the world itself. Emma wrapped her arms around him and cried too, even though she barely understood death. I held them both, rocking them because I didn't know how else to keep us from falling apart. And in the middle of this storm of grief, Ethan was nowhere. Hours turned into a full day, then 2. I left message after message. "Please," I whispered into the phone. "They need you." No response. No sign of him. The kids slept in my bed those nights, their tiny hands gripping my shirt as if I might disappear too. On the 3rd morning, I received a call from the hospital billing department. The number they named made my knees buckle. "We'll need payment arrangements as soon as possible," the woman said. "Unfortunately, we can't release the body until—" My voice cracked. "I understand." After I hung up, I went into the bathroom and cried into a towel so the kids wouldn't hear. By the 5th day, I was furious. Furious at Ethan for abandoning them again. Furious at myself for believing him. Furious at the universe for taking Lily when she finally had hope within reach. I woke early that morning and found Theo on the couch, wrapped in Emma's favorite blanket. He looked far older than 8. "Do you think Mama knew she was dying?" he asked softly. My voice trembled. "I think she knew she loved you more than anything in this world." He nodded slowly, like an old man accepting something he didn't want to understand. That afternoon, while the kids napped, there was a knock on my door. I opened it expecting the neighbor or another bill collector or maybe the landlord reminding me rent was late. Instead, it was Ethan, but not the Ethan from the church, not the man who cried into his children's shoulders. This Ethan looked like someone who had been through war. His eyes were red, his shirt wrinkled, his voice raw. "Sarah," he whispered, "I'm sorry I couldn't come sooner." My anger rose instantly, sharp and hot. 5 days, I hissed. "They cried 5 nights waiting for you. And Lily," my voice cracked into a sob, "she's gone." Ethan flinched like I had struck him. "I know," he said hoarsely. "I was at the hospital last night. I saw her. He choked on the words. "I took care of everything. The bills, the arrangements. All of it." I froze. "What?" He nodded, looking down. I didn't disappear. I spent the last 5 days fighting insurance companies, funeral homes, financial offices, every bureaucratic wall in this city. Lily deserved dignity, and you didn't deserve to shoulder that burden. I stared at him, breath unsteady. He continued, voice breaking. "I was terrified, Sarah. Not of the kids, of failing them again, of failing Lily one last time. I didn't want to face you until I had done something right." My anger began to crumble, replaced by something quieter, heavier. He reached into his coat and handed me a folded receipt, hospital charges marked paid burial fees, covered in a dress for a small memorial. Nothing extravagant, but full of respect. Tears spilled down my cheeks. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was barely more than a whisper. "Because I didn't want thanks. I wanted to make it right." Behind me, I heard small footsteps. Emma and Theo stood in the doorway, sleepy and fragile. Ethan looked at them as if he'd been waiting his entire life to see their faces again. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. Theo hesitated, then walked toward him slowly, carefully, silently. He reached out and took Ethan's hand. Emma joined them, pressing her cheek against Ethan's arm. And for the first time since Lily's death, something inside that broken week finally stopped collapsing. It began, just barely, to heal. 3 days after Ethan returned, and the storm of the past week settled into a heavy silence that clung to the walls like fog, something unexpected arrived at my door. It was a crisp white envelope, thick with no name on the outside. Just my address handwritten in a shaky script I recognized instantly. Lily's handwriting. My breath caught. My hands trembled as I closed the door behind me and leaned against it. Emma and Theo were sitting on the floor, drawing with crayons, unaware of the way my world tilted on its axis again. I sat at the kitchen table and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded twice. When I unfolded it, the first line knocked the air from my lungs. "Sarah, if you are reading this, it means I am gone." I pressed a hand against my chest, holding myself together. Lily continued, "I wrote this the night you gave us shelter. I was afraid my time was shorter than I let on. I needed someone to know the truth before everything fell apart." Tears blurred my vision as I kept reading. "Theo needs a family, not a charity case, not pity, a family. You have already given him more love in one night than life has given him in years." My throat tightened. I glanced at Theo in the living room. He was humming softly while he colored, unaware that his mother's final words were in my hands. "And Ethan," the letter continued, "he never knew. Not because he didn't care, but because life broke him before it broke me. He deserves a chance to be the father he wanted to be. Please don't let anger win. Let the children decide the shape of your family. They know more about love than we ever did." I broke then. Silent, shaking sobs into my hands. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair that death had taken the one person who should have been here to say these words. The kids looked up startled and ran to me. Emma crawled into my lap while Theo stood frozen, fear in his eyes. "What's wrong?" he whispered. "Baby," I said through tears, pulling him close. "Your mom wrote us a letter." His small body tensed. "Can I see?" I hesitated, but then handed it to him. His fingers were trembling as much as mine. He read slowly, carefully. His lips moved silently over each line. When he reached the last sentence, he crumpled forward and buried his face in my chest. "Mama knew," he cried. "Mama knew I loved you. She wanted us to be together." Emma hugged him too, wrapping her arms around his shoulders like she had always been his sister. I kissed their heads and held them tightly until their breathing steadied. Later that afternoon, Ethan arrived, his eyes exhausted, his posture cautious like he wasn't sure if he belonged in the doorway. I handed him the letter without saying a word. He read it standing up, one hand pressed to his forehead, the other gripping the paper so tightly it wrinkled. When he finished, he closed his eyes. A tear slid down his cheek before he wiped it away quickly. His voice cracked. "She was always braver than I deserved." I didn't speak. I couldn't. He looked at the kids. Theo stood up, walked to him, and held out his tiny hand. "Daddy," he whispered. Ethan knelt down and pulled him into his arms, letting out a sound that was not quite a sob, not quite a breath. Emma joined them without hesitation. For a moment, I stood completely still as the three of them clung to each other. Something sacred was happening, something fragile and enormous all at once. I watched Ethan soften in real time. I watched Theo finally rest in the arms that should have held him 8 years ago. And I watched Emma, with the unfiltered love only a child could offer, bridge the gap that adults had created. When they stood, Ethan turned to me. "Sarah," he whispered, "I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want to do right by all of you. I want us to figure this out together, whatever it takes." I swallowed hard. I wasn't ready to talk about forgiveness, but I also wasn't willing to shut the door Lily had asked me to keep open. "We'll do it one step at a time," I said softly. Relief washed over him. Then he reached inside his coat. "There's something else," he said, handing me a second envelope, this one sealed with an official crest. My stomach flipped as I opened it. To Sarah Jennings it read, "You are invited to attend a meeting at Miller and Carter Foundation to discuss expanded support for families in crisis. Nominated by Ethan Miller." I stared at it in disbelief. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly shy. "Lily told me how many people you've helped long before you ever met me. I want the world to see what I saw." My vision blurred again. I'm not anything special, I whispered. You are, he said quietly. You saved my son. You held my daughter. And you carried all three of us through hell. Emma tugged my sleeve. Mama Sarah, she said, smiling up at me. Are we going to be a family? The room went still. Ethan's breath hitched. Theo looked between us, hope bright in his eyes. My voice trembled as I answered. We're going to try. All of us. Together. Emma beamed and wrapped her arms around us both. Theo joined, pressing into my side. And Ethan? He didn't say a word. He just placed his hand gently on my back like someone finally reaching home after years of being lost. And somewhere deep inside me, something shifted. Something softened. Something opened. Because maybe Lily was right. Maybe the children really did know more about love than we ever did. That night, after the kids finally drifted to sleep in a pile of blankets on the living room couch, Ethan and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the overhead light soft and warm, but unable to melt the tension between us. There was no shouting in the air, no anger, just the weight of years that had gone unspoken pressing against both of our chests. He rubbed his palms together like he was trying to warm himself from the inside. I need to tell you something, he said quietly, eyes fixed on the table. Not to ask for forgiveness, just because you deserve to know. I nodded, though a part of me wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. He took a long breath. When I met Lily, we were both drowning. I had just lost my mother. You know how some people get stronger when they lose someone they love? I wasn't one of those people. I fell apart. I couldn't work, couldn't sleep. I was terrified I was becoming the man my father was. He wasn't cruel, just absent. Always running, always overwhelmed. I used to promise myself I'd never be him. And then life hit me in the exact same place he had been hit, and suddenly, I understood why he ran. His voice cracked, but he didn't look away. When Lily told me she might be pregnant, I panicked. I know that's not an excuse, but it's the truth. I thought I would ruin that baby's life the way my father ruined mine. He dragged a hand down his face, ashamed. I told her I needed space. I said I would get my life together and come back. I even meant it at the time. But the next week she moved. Quit her job, changed her number. I thought she wanted nothing to do with me, so I didn't chase her. I didn't fight. I just disappeared. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to throw his words back at him. But something in his voice, some trembling honesty held me still. You didn't try, I said quietly. Not even once. I know. His eyes finally lifted to mine, raw and unprotected. I was 26, scared, selfish, broken. But I'm not that man anymore. The silence between us pulsed. He continued softer now. When I saw Theo for the first time when he looked at me with those same eyes, Sarah, I knew instantly. Even before the DNA test, my body knew, my soul knew. I felt sick. I kept thinking if I had just stayed, if I had just been brave, he wouldn't have grown up cold and hungry. His voice shook and he pressed a fist against his mouth as if holding back a sob. Lily protected him better than I ever could have. She was everything I failed to be. I leaned back, letting the truth settle over both of us. Why didn't you tell me any of this earlier? He exhaled slowly. Because I didn't think you'd believe me. I didn't think anyone would. I barely believe myself. I stared at him, studying the way guilt sat on his shoulders like a physical weight. He wasn't dodging responsibility. He was drowning in it. When Lily died, he said quietly, I didn't leave for myself. I left because I knew what was coming. The bills, the funeral, the paperwork. I didn't want you to deal with that alone. So I called every connection I had left. I fought the hospital. I fought the insurance. I fought the city. I didn't want her memory to be a burden on you. Something in me softened even though I didn't want it to. You should have told me. I didn't want you to think I was trying to prove something or buy forgiveness. I just wanted to take care of what I should have taken care of 8 years ago. I took a slow breath. You still hurt people, Ethan. You hurt Lily. You hurt Theo. And now you're here asking me to help put all the pieces back together. I'm not asking you to fix me, he said, shaking his head. I'm asking you to let me show up for my kids, and if you let me, I want to show up for you too." His words sent a ripple through me. Not romantic, not manipulative, just steady, real. The kind of truth a broken man finally learns to say when he has nothing left to lose. "I don't trust you yet," I whispered. "I know," he said, "and I don't expect you to. Trust isn't given. It's earned one day at a time." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized the man sitting across from me wasn't the boy who ran away from responsibility. He was someone trying to rebuild himself from ruins, someone who had been judged by the world and found lacking and now stood here offering the only thing he had left: honesty. "Do you want a fresh start with me?" I asked carefully. He shook his head. "Not a fresh start, a true one. No lies, no disappearing, no fear." My chest tightened. "And what about the kids?" "They come first. Always. Before me. Before us. Before anything." His eyes glistened in the warm kitchen light, and something in the room shifted. The past loosened its grip just a little. The future moved closer. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just quietly. Like healing does when you finally stop running from it. "Okay," I whispered. "One day at a time." He nodded his shoulders, dropping as though he had been holding his breath for years. Then, for the first time since Lily's death, he smiled. Not wide, not certain, but real. And somehow, it was enough. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of cold that seeped through even the fanciest evening coats, the kind that made you feel small no matter how hard you tried to stand tall. I had never been to an event like this, the kind where people walked into the hotel ballroom like they were stepping onto a private stage, every gesture polished, every smile rehearsed. I felt out of place the second I stepped into the glittering room holding a simple black dress I had borrowed from a coworker and clutching my purse as if it could shield me from judgment. The room was filled with executives, donors, spouses in shimmering gowns, and men who smelled like expensive cologne and confidence. Somewhere near the center, Ethan stood in a charcoal suit that fit him too well, the kind of suit that silently declared authority. But when he saw me, his posture softened as though my presence reached him before my steps did. I didn't make it 2 feet into the ballroom before the whispers started. I heard them before I saw the faces. "Is that her?" The woman with the 2 kids, I heard. "She's the reason Ethan snapped back into the spotlight. Climbed pretty fast, didn't she?" The words stung because they came from women with diamond bracelets and practiced voices. The type of women who judged without even looking directly at you. I forced myself to breathe. I reminded myself I wasn't here to impress anyone. I was here because Ethan insisted I deserved to be recognized for helping organize the community fund. It should have been enough. But then one woman, tall and perfectly polished, stepped right in front of me near the drink table. Her red lips curved into a smile that felt like a blade, so she purred, tilting her glass toward me. "You're the woman everyone's talking about." I froze. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said carefully. She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that carried across a room. "Oh, honey, there's no need to pretend. Some women just know how to use opportunity. Climbing must be easier when a powerful man gives you a hand." Her friends giggled behind their manicured hands. My cheeks burned. My throat tightened. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to run. But then before I could step back, before I could defend myself, a voice echoed through the room. "Is there a problem here?" The woman's smile faltered as she turned. Ethan stood behind me, expression unreadable, but eyes sharp, protective, and growing darker by the second. "We were just talking," she said lightly. I was just telling her how impressive her rise has been. Some people just know how to position themselves. The words weren't subtle. They were poison dipped in silk. I stared at the floor, humiliation crawling up my spine. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You're mistaken," he said, stepping forward, placing himself firmly between me and them. "Sarah didn't climb anything." I collapsed, and she lifted my family when I couldn't stand. The entire group fell silent. Conversations around us died down as heads turned our way. Ethan continued not for the women but for the entire room. While the rest of the world walked past Theo and Lily, while the city turned its back on a mother dying alone while I hid from the mistakes I made years ago, she was the one who stepped forward. She fed them, sheltered them, loved them, protected them. He paused, breath trembling slightly. If anyone here thinks that's manipulation or ambition, then you don't understand compassion at all. The woman's face paled. Whispering rippled across the room like a wave. But Ethan wasn't finished. He walked toward the stage where the microphone waited for the keynote speaker. The event coordinator tried to stop him, but he shook his head, picked up the mic, and faced the entire ballroom. "Before this gala begins," he said, voice carrying with quiet strength, "I want you all to know the real story." I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs until I thought I might faint. Ethan took a breath. "Months ago, I was a man drowning in grief and guilt. I didn't deserve forgiveness. I didn't deserve a second chance. But Sarah gave it to me anyway. Not because she wanted anything, but because 2 children needed love." The spotlight hit him from the side, catching the emotion in his eyes. "She taught me what family means, what responsibility means. And she taught me that healing doesn't come from wealth or reputation. It comes from showing up." People listened. Not politely, not out of decorum, but with genuine stillness. Ethan lowered his voice. "Tonight isn't about donors or business. It's about the people who hold the world together quietly without applause. Sarah is one of those people, and I am a better man because of her." The room erupted in applause. Real applause, not the polite golf clap kind. It echoed off the marble columns and crystal chandeliers. I stood frozen, overwhelmed, my chest tight, with something I hadn't expected to feel in a long time: dignity. Ethan stepped off the stage and walked straight to me. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. He simply stood beside me, shoulders aligned with mine, his presence a shield. "You belong here," he whispered, "and I'm done letting anyone make you feel otherwise." And for the first time in years, I believed it. 1 year later, I woke to the soft sound of laughter drifting through the hallway, the kind of laughter that fills a home before the sun even rises. Emma's giggles blended with Theo's deeper little boy laugh, and the warmth of it spread through my chest before my feet even touched the wooden floor. There was a time these quiet mornings were filled with dread and exhaustion, mornings where survival was the only goal. Now I walked out into a home that felt like a second skin warm and lived in the smell of coffee already filling the air because Ethan always woke first, claiming he liked starting the day before the world demanded anything from him. Today, he stood in the kitchen, barefoot hair, softly messy, wearing a faded gray shirt as he flipped pancakes while the kids stood on stools beside him, each holding a spoon bigger than their arms. "Mom," Emma whispered loudly when she saw me, like she'd revealed a secret Daddy burned the first batch. Ethan shot me a mock glare as he held up the charred disc. "Absolute lies. This is modern art." Theo laughed so hard he nearly fell off his stool, and I walked over, slipping a hand onto his back in instinctive protection. He leaned into me without thinking. The ease of that movement still broke something open inside me every time. Breakfast was chaos in the way only children can create: syrup on cheeks, crumbs on the floor, arguments about which cartoon character was strongest. But it was ours, and the miracle was how normal it felt. After breakfast, Ethan announced we had somewhere to go. "A surprise," he said, and Emma immediately launched into messy theories involving unicorns, snowstorms, and a puppy. Theo stayed quiet, but his eyes sparkled. We loaded into the car, a mismatched family that somehow fit together perfectly. A little girl who never stopped talking. A boy who watched everything with quiet wisdom. A man trying every day to be the father he wasn't allowed to be. And me, someone who had lived far too long believing I didn't deserve to be part of something whole. The drive took us back toward the city, toward the old neighborhood, toward the shadows of the past I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The farther we went, the tighter my chest felt, until Ethan reached across the console and threaded his fingers through mine, a subtle grounding. "Trust me," he murmured, not as reassurance but as invitation. The car rolled to a stop beside a small park, and the moment I stepped out, I felt the memory slam into me. Rain. Cold. Neon streetlights. A little boy curled around his unconscious mother. Emma tugging my hand with urgency. "Mama, he looks like me." That night lived in my bones, and now Ethan was leading us toward the same cracked concrete bench under the same crooked lamppost, only now warm sunlight filtered through the branches above us, and not a single drop of rain touched my skin. Theo's hand slipped into mine. "This is where you found me, right?" he asked softly. My breath caught. I knelt to face him fully. "This is where we found each other?" I said. Emma nodded dramatically as if she had orchestrated the entire universe. "And where Daddy almost fainted," she added. Ethan groaned. "Traitor." But he was smiling. Then he cleared his throat, his expression shifting into something deeper, more vulnerable. "I brought you all here," he said, voice steady but threaded with emotion, because this place used to be where everything broke. But now I want it to be the place where everything comes together. My heart stilled. The wind quieted as if listening. He crouched so he was eye level with the kids and me, his hands resting gently on their backs. "I can't erase the past," he said. "I can't undo the mistakes or the years we lost, but I can build the future, and I want to build it with all of you." Emma's eyes widened. Theo's breath hitched. And mine trembled. Ethan reached into his coat pocket, and for one wild second, I thought he was about to propose, but instead, he pulled out something small wrapped in soft fabric. "This isn't a ring," he said quickly, reading my mind. "Not yet. Not until you're ready. This is a promise." He opened his hand. Inside was a delicately carved wooden token, smooth and warm, engraved with 4 initials intertwined, E-T-E-S. Emma, Theo, Ethan, Sarah, a family, he said quietly, not by blood alone, not by obligation, but by choice. "I choose you, all of you, every day." My throat tightened, tears burning hot at the corners of my eyes. Theo touched the token reverently. "So we stay together," he whispered. "If you'll have me," Ethan said, voice shaking slightly. Emma didn't give me a chance to breathe. She launched herself onto Ethan with such force he nearly toppled over. "We choose you too, Daddy," she declared. Then she spun toward me and grabbed my wrist. "Do you choose us, Mama?" Her question wasn't small. It was enormous. It held the weight of everything we had survived and everything we still hoped to become. I looked at my children, at the man who had broken and rebuilt himself piece by piece, at the place where our lives had collided in the harshest of nights. "I choose us," I said, and in that moment the sunlight broke through the clouds and washed over us like a blessing. Theo wrapped his arms around my waist. Emma hugged my leg. Ethan pressed his forehead to mine, whispering a soft exhale that felt like relief, redemption, and rebirth. We stood together under the patchy shade of the old tree, the ghost of the past fading behind us, the promise of the future glowing ahead. That night, I had saved a little boy in the rain. But in truth, that night had saved all of us. And as we walked away from the bench hand in hand, stepping out of the shadows and into the light, I realized something I had never dared believe. I wasn't just part of a family. I was home. If this story brought even the smallest ache to your chest or stirred a memory you thought you had forgotten, then stay with me for just a moment longer, because what you just witnessed was not simply a tale about a lost boy or a man crushed by guilt or a woman fighting the world with nothing but her own courage. It was a reminder, whispered through every choice and every tear, that in this life the things we think are broken beyond repair often find their way back to the light. Maybe you saw yourself in Sarah trying to stay strong while the world judged you for the things it never took the time to understand. Maybe you felt the trembling truth in Theo's tiny hands, a child who never asked for pain, yet carried it with quiet bravery. Or maybe you recognized something familiar in Ethan, a man who made mistakes but refused to let those mistakes define the rest of his life. Because that is what being human is: failing, falling, and somehow finding a way to stand again when someone reaches out a hand. And sometimes that hand belongs to a stranger who becomes family. Sometimes it belongs to a child who loves without fear. Sometimes it belongs to you. And if this story touched you, if it made you look at your own life and whisper, even for a second, that love can still grow in the places where grief once lived, then I want to invite you to stay with us, to keep walking with us, because every week we bring you stories that don't just entertain. They remind you of who you are, of what you've survived, of the quiet grace that still exists in a world that can feel so cold. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Stories about forgiveness that takes courage, love that takes patience, healing that takes time. Stories that prove family is not always blood, but the people who choose you. The people who stand beside you when your world collapses, the people who remind you that you matter. And if you felt even a flicker of that tonight, if you felt that familiar tightening in your throat or that slow warmth in your chest, then don't let this moment end here. Stay with us. Join this community of listeners who believe in second chances, who believe that compassion can change the course of a life, who believe that kindness is still the strongest force on earth. So before you go, take a breath. Place your hand on your heart and remember this. You are part of these stories too. Your life, your scars, your victories, your quiet resilience. They matter, and we want you here with us. If this story moved you even a little, please like, share, and subscribe. Not for the algorithm, but so that the next time your heart feels heavy or lonely or tired, you'll have a place to come back to. A place where stories heal. A place where hope lives. A place where you belong. Thank you for watching, thank you for feeling, and thank you for being part of this journey. Until the next story, keep your heart open, always.